So, hi, we're Jessie and Tara from Fowler and Ward. We're presenting Smith House today. So, not rocket science, this one. The solid and generous bones of this late 70s brown brick number, a real stalwart of the Aussie suburbs, meant that only a few fundamental moves dealing with light, views and spatial connections were really needed to transform the house. But the reason we think it's a project that's innovative and potentially worth sharing is sort of because it happened at all. Funnily enough, it's happened twice today. We watched the beautiful SSDH project presented earlier, and we agree with those guys that this brick veneer typology is a really valuable part of the heritage landscape, particularly of the northern suburbs of Melbourne, and perhaps we're at the sort of vanguard of appreciating this next round of heritage homes. Our clients, Liz and Joel, were really the visionaries on this one because they decided that this particular house really did deserve a considered sensitive architectural renovation and not to be knocked down. Their brief asked us to embrace this quintessential suburban home and tweak it just enough to operate as a practical, bright and more sustainable family home for them and their two boys. And of course, we were 100% on board for the ride. We were really excited for the opportunity to demonstrate what could be achieved with a house of this era, and particularly for the chance to lean into all the stuff that I think a lot of other clients would prefer to hide, the brown brick, the bronze window frames, the brown laminate bench tops. We really loved it all. And we knew the clients were potentially, were properly on board and properly committed to this when this dolphin fountain image appeared in Liz's early reference images. Existing conditions. The house was dark, the living spaces were really segmented, the kitchen, dining and lounge room were sort of in completely different parts of the plan. Lots of the site was dedicated to cars, there was a big garage, a side driveway and concrete everywhere. And the interior was completely disconnected from the garden with very little outlook, and a really kind of a substantial level change you can see at the bottom, about 3 or 4 steps down. So the existing plan, we're on 570 square metres in West Brunswick, a freestanding house set off all the boundaries. North to the street, so potentially a little tricky, a right of way to the rear, which the clients didn't use and didn't require access to be reinstated to. And the bones of the simple and generous plan worked in lots of ways, sort of towards the front of the house. So we consolidated our approach into 3 main moves that are highlighted here.
So we relocated the services to the centre of the plan. We squeezed an ensuite into the old, enormous master bedroom. And we squeezed a laundry, Joel's office, powder room and a family bathroom into the old kitchen. A small 8 square metre extension, if we kind of flick between the new and old, you can see, allowed us to consolidate the kitchen, living and dining rooms into the rear. The final move was to refurbish the existing garage into guest accommodation, Liz's jewellery workshop and a shed. The original garage was a bit of an eyesore, and while it still isn't beautiful, we clad it in black colorbond and Rio mesh so that it will eventually disappear into the garden. Like lots of things on this project, it was a conscious decision not to tear it down and rebuild it just for the sake of it. There are a few key manoeuvres which elevate the project, the first being the approach to light. By keeping the extension compact and keeping the building off the boundaries, we were able to achieve a bright living space that gets sun throughout the day despite the southern orientation. Capturing the morning sun was a key piece of the brief, and we achieved it with a skylight and large east-facing window. The northwest corner window in the Sunken lounge also really illuminates the space, as do the reflections that you get off the glossy amber tiles. The existing structure gave us the opportunity to play with level changes in the lounge and in the garden. By sinking the lounge, we were able to tuck in under the eaves of the existing roofline, which you can see in section down below, meaning we could keep the pitched tiled roof untouched and just tuck right in there. Sinking the lounge had lots of other benefits. It allowed the overall footprint of the living room to be smaller, as the sofa can be pushed to the edges of the room without feeling cramped. It creates differentiation between the otherwise open plan spaces, and it obviously leans into the 70s vibe. This level change also creates a more varied garden experience, and the experience of the secluded northern side garden is much more intimate and direct, especially from the window seat you see here. In contrast, the interior connection to the garden to the backyard, feels elevated with broad and sweeping views of the sky, garden and neighbouring treetops. At the rear, a terraced deck blurs the edges of the building. The steps create incidental outdoor seating And the depth of the deck means that there's always part of it in either sun or shade, whatever you need throughout the year.
We developed a palette for the project that really responds to the era of the house, but it also feels like an evolution. It's still fresh and surprising and contemporary. It also reflects the really, really creative and colourful taste and personality of our jewellery designer client, Liz. It's obviously anchored in warm tones and textures on things like the sort of shaggy pile carpet and painted OSB joinery throughout that don't feel out of place with the existing amber glass and teak-toned trim that's found in the front of the house. And we also had a really involved and engaged client. So she sourced this vintage wallpaper that you can see on the wall in the powder room and a lot of vintage lighting that's found throughout. And, you know, a light touch is another common thread that is found throughout the project. We were pretty determined to do as little as possible to the front of the house and stuff around with it as little as possible. It's the same motto throughout. If it's not broke, don't fix it. We replaced the windows with double glazed. We added a skylight in the entry. There's new lighting, carpet and storage. But we even retained the sort of mismatched timber flooring, hardwood at the front and Baltic pine elsewhere, and all the original doors and trim.
2 minutes left.
This light touch is really apparent in the exterior. At the back, we're faced with a common problem that we have on small projects. How do we give such a small extension some integrity? For us, working with the existing facade was key. We clad the new section in stack bond, site salvage bricks, a subtle contrast to the existing brickwork. Powder-coated bronze door and window frames were used for the new sliders and the new glazing throughout the entire house. The change is barely noticeable, especially from the street. At the front, we tiled the existing concrete porch and we inserted a new amber glass timber front door and diagonal timber-clad side panels. Rather than rip up the driveway, we carved slices out of it to allow the garden to seep through, and the lush planting by Miniscapes also really helped soften the house and make use of the large front garden. We love that from the street, the interventions are so subtle that passers-by don't immediately recognise the extent of transformation. The house looks like it's always been there. It's just a bit more loved and lived in, and we think that's the project's strength. The renovation demonstrates that this overlooked housing type doesn't need to be torn down or rendered or painted. The key project decision to restore the house rather than rebuild it, as would be a common thought process if you were spending a lot of money on a house renovation, is I think the fundamental sustainable design move here. These houses often have great bones, and with a bit of love, a typical brown brick suburban home can be a comfortable and joyful and contemporary house. Thank you.